All right, coming to you from snowy Pennsylvania. Here we are. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. Welcome to you, whoever you are, new listener, returning friends. Thank you for listening today. I appreciate it. And as I was just referencing to, we have just had the biggest snowfall of the year here in Pennsylvania. Just over the last few hours, at least 6 inches or so has just fallen. And I was sitting here, I was taking in the beauty of that fresh snowfall. It was all white and quiet. Everything was so quiet. I was taking in, oh my God, this is the most quiet it's ever been here in the attic. And I was just loving this. This is perfect. I'll record the intro in the quiet of this fresh snow. And then all of a sudden, my neighbor turned on his snow blower. I don't know if you can hear that. Hopefully you cannot. But I can. Doesn't matter. It's still quite beautiful. I can't believe my neighbor's already out there blowing the snow. Whatever. What are you going to do? Like I said, it's still beautiful. And you know what else is more beautiful than that? For those of you who've been around over the last few weeks, that pain flare that I had, it really has subsided. And I'm feeling 1,000,000 times better than I was. And the more important part is that I was feeling great yesterday when I attended and participated in the 20th anniversary of the Dragonfly Yoga Festival. My friends Joe and Alexis in Doylestown. Shout out to you both. Shout out to you, Joe. I had a great time at the festival. It was really beautiful. I also recorded a podcast with Rolf Gates, which is awesome. You'll get to hear that in a couple of weeks. So just coming off of a couple of days of things turning for the better. Remember, I was talking about things not turning for the better. Well, they did turn for the better. And I'm so grateful for that, you know. Anyone who has experienced any kind of chronic or debilitating pain, you know, you become so very grateful for when you don't. When you don't have pain, when you can feel okay in your body. You can feel well in your body. It's such a blessing. So happy to report that to my friends who've sent me messages of concern. Thank you for those prayers and good wishes. Really, you know what it was that I think helped me turn the pain around? Really, I'll give you the specifics. It was restorative yoga, essentially super supported shavasana, like twice a day, one shorter, one like extended. And then push-ups, frankly, push-ups and restorative yoga was the key for me. Those are the things that my body really wanted. And just being really disciplined while I was teaching and not demonstrating stuff, which is a challenge, you know, especially with the new center. Like if a new student comes in, I almost feel like I have to demonstrate stuff in order for them to kind of get clued into the forms and everything. But you know what? You don't really need to demonstrate as much as you think you do. It's more of like an ego thing. So telling someone that I have a pain issue, so I'm going to teach from a chair, even the first time I'm meeting them, while feeling challenging, I think also is really appropriate for what I teach. It keeps me aligned with my beliefs. So all of that is to say, I'm very happy to be feeling better. And thank you to anybody who sent me good wishes. Also, I would say that I had a couple of really cool things happen at the new center. One of which was a class in which 2 new people came and 2 old friends came. So already like a 4-person class, I was like, woohoo! But the 2 new people, one of them was a teacher who lives like not too far from here, like maybe a half hour's drive or so. And she heard me on another podcast. I don't know if those of you listening would know this. I was on another podcast called A Funny Thing About Yoga. And this person heard me on that podcast and then made a trip to come hang out. And that was super cool. I think her name was Amy. Amy, if you're listening, shout out to you. And then another younger teacher named Corinne came. And I don't know if Corinne will ever hear this, but maybe she will. Maybe she will. Shout out to you, Corinne. She is someone who came to class, and I don't know, y'all. I think there's a good chance that Corinne will teach some classes at the birdhouse because she just kind of came in the right way. And I don't know, she seems kind of young and hungry, and that's exactly what the center needs. So some really positive things happened in this last week, and I'm gonna own that for what it is, and I'm happy to share that with my friends who listen today. Speaking of friends and sharing with them, my guest today is Laurie Lowe, and I do consider Laurie a friend. We met in person a little while back when I made a trip to Manchester, England. She has a yoga center called Sage Yoga Center in Belpar, England. And she reached out to me recently when I was talking about running yoga centers and how I was running them. And she's managed to have a thing going in a very unconventional way. And so we connected to talk about that, talk about having your own space and different ways of administering spaces and running yoga centers, and how she's managed to have a thing going for the last 6 years and what she's doing. So super cool. I'm very happy to have had this conversation with my friend Laurie, and I'm so glad to be sharing it with you today. Real quick before we get to it, let me mention that if you want to connect with me in other ways outside of just listening to the show, there's lots of opportunities for us to do that. I have ongoing live classes. I've got a weekly discussion group. I've got on-demand continuing education videos. Or maybe you'd like to dive into the full-length archives of the show and become a supporter with a podcast premium subscription. You can find all of my stuff at jbrownyoga.com. Okay, y'all. I think we'll leave it there. I will touch base with you on the other side, but let's go ahead and get to it. Let's listen to this conversation that I had with Laurie Lowe.
Hello.
Hi, Laurie.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing okay.
What a lovely start to the new year.
Yes, here we are. Just freshly begun into the new year. I think you know the deal. I'm recording. Let's consider ourselves having just begun, okay?
Yeah, that's cool. I'm used to this. 5 years listening.
Well, I'm happy to have this moment with you on many different levels, not just because you've been listening to the podcast for 5 years, which, you know, is a thing in and of itself. But we did meet. We met in person briefly back in September of 2023. I just looked it up.
Yeah, I thought it was last year, meaning 24. I didn't realize it was that long ago. It doesn't seem that long for me, but yeah, no. 2023, September.
It's been a little more than a year, and I didn't think it was that long ago either. I believe I said to you in your email, my response to you, I said, Manchester wasn't that long ago, because I felt like the same thing. I was like, not that long ago, because you're like, I don't know if you remember me. It was not that long ago, but actually it's been more longer than I thought.
Yeah. Well, last year went on remarkably quickly. It's time seemed to be speeded up a little.
I couldn't agree more. Like it blurred a little bit. And I'm suddenly like, oh, whoa, it's 2025? How did that happen?
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to have this moment. I was remembering you some vaguely from our time in Manchester. It was just a day, if I recall.
Yeah, that's right. Me and my friend travelled up from Belper in Derbyshire on the Sunday. We couldn't make I can't remember now, but we couldn't make the whole weekend. So we came up for the day on the Sunday, and it was just beautiful. I don't get much time to do things like that. And it really struck a chord, the things you said, and listening to your journey unfolding over this last year with you opening your studio, it just really resonated. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what I was thinking about as well. Back in September of 2023, I can't remember what I was talking about, but I do think you might have mentioned to me that you have a center in a smaller town or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was talking about how I was in Manchester instead of London, and that was okay. And we were talking about like numbers, maybe. I kind of remember us having some conversation around that. But I do not believe I was thinking or talking at all about opening a yoga center myself in that moment.
No, I don't think you were. I think that evolved over the last year.
Yes, it did.
But it was meant to be.
What were you going to say?
It sounds like it was definitely meant to be.
Well, yes, I think so. Having said that, as I was just talking about on the podcast a few weeks ago in my like year-end check-in, I was talking about the center. I did just finish like my first 3 months and was sort of like making myself take a hard look at the numbers too, not just like the soul side of it and the beauty of that and everything, but like also like, okay, what am I really looking at? Is this really going to work or not, you know?
Yeah.
And lots of questions around for myself now, how I'm like administrating it, you know, like we talked about whether or not you're doing memberships and class packages and stuff like that. And I have some doubts. So anyways, I am curious. You're doing something a bit different from what I heard in your email too. So in any case, that's what brings us together. I am really interested, not just to reconnect with friends, but also to talk to people who have been finding a way to make a little yoga operation work of one sort or another. And so I'm happy to have this moment. Thanks for reaching out and making this time. I'm glad to be speaking with you.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you responding so quickly. It wasn't sort of intentional to do this, really. It was just to connect and just offer my version of things and my side and my experience. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, just what's evolved for me over the last few years as we've set up the space and watched it sort of grow and flourish, really. And it's not necessarily the traditional machine or model that you would expect. It's small, it's independent. I can't say it's unique, but it's grown very organically and very naturally in a way that has never felt like it had to be too pushed or in people's faces. I've never over marketed or had to sell my soul to the devil.
Yes, I love that. That's the phrase you picked out when you looked for one. You know, I saw you reach into your mind and you picked out that one. We could talk about that. I guess I'm curious, before we get to some of the nitty-gritties of like how you're running your show and whether or not I need to change what I'm doing. I not that I think I am. I'm joking, but really, I'm curious of that evolution because your time frame is different than mine. You know, like I had a place back when from 2007 to 2017. Sure. Now I'm starting again now. I was looking at your website and clicking around a little bit. I saw, if I'm not mistaken, you opened your place in 2018. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, I had been teaching before that.
But that's what I was going to say. So how long before you opened that center were you like doing teaching, and how much of that time were you making your living teaching back then too?
Well, so I'll probably track back a little. So I started practicing yoga in my early 20s, and it wasn't it was never a plan to become a teacher. I think a lot of us never plan to become teachers. It's sort of a weird thing that sort of happens to us. And I went to a teacher. It did something to me that I can't really explain. And then I sort of progressed. I started to go to a different teacher. She finished teaching. She was quite a lot older. She was an old school teacher. It was a brilliant teacher. And then I found a new teacher. He was British Wheel of Yoga, the usual trajectory, teaching in a village hall. I think it was like above a little old museum in Ilkeston in Derbyshire. And I was with this teacher for quite some time. And as it was back then, you practiced, you showed up, you dedicated yourself to the practice. And lo and behold, eventually they might suggest that you then became a teacher yourself. And so you were put forwards, and you had to have references, and you had to be attending classes for quite a considerable amount of time. And I did the British School of Yoga Year Foundation, which is probably longer than a standard 200-hour yoga teacher training now, possibly more in depth. And then I went on to do the first year and a half of the British Wheel of Yoga teacher training. And I got pregnant with my daughter and had my daughter, and just found it a little bit overwhelming. She didn't sleep. She was quite high energy baby, and trying to juggle lots of things, and parenthood was something we really wanted, and we wanted to spend time with her. So I dropped or paused the teacher training. At that time, I took a break, and I ended up I finished work. I'd taken a year off work, having had my daughter, with a view to going back. And I went back for 2.5 weeks and handed my notice in. And
that job, that wasn't teaching yoga, that was another gig?
I'd worked in the print industry. I worked in the corporate field a little bit. I worked for a design agency in the end as a project director. Completely different, with this yoga journey going alongside that. Obviously, that was funding the training. It was never an idea to go full-time into teaching yoga.
I see. Yeah, that's interesting, because we used to call that the money gig. People had a money gig where they were able to pay their rent, and then yoga was this other thing they did as their passion or whatever.
Yeah, no, it sort of never evolved like that. It was really, I had a full-time job. I had my daughter. I had a bit of an epiphany, having had a child. I realised that what I was doing was not really fulfilling or life-affirming. It paid the bills and it ticked all the boxes. So, I'm lucky to have a husband who was able to support us. We took the decision for me to not go back to work and to look after our daughter, which I know is a huge privilege. And we really did have to tighten the belt. And our term in the UK is to be skint, but I suppose it's probably just to not have so much disposable income and not do the fun things. And I went to a baby yoga class. I couldn't physically get to a yoga class. My daughter wouldn't be away from me that long. I found a baby yoga class, and it was just like, oh my God, this is amazing. Absolutely amazing. I get to come here for an hour and a half a week. I'm held space for. My daughter's then getting the best of me. It was the only time she really relaxed. She would sleep. The simplest of things, I would get a cup of tea and a biscuit at the end of it that I could drink and eat. And it was such a powerful experience in terms of being held in that way. That's my trajectory went off to that, in that direction for a few years. So I went off and I trained to be a baby yoga teacher, but having had quite a considerable amount of experience as a practitioner and training. So I wasn't coming at it from a completely fresh perspective, having no sort of yogic background, but I knew I needed to offer this to other people. So I did that for probably around, my daughter was 2, she's 14 now. So I probably did that for about 10 to 11 years. But that desire I found that I was teaching the mums much more yoga than the babies as time progressed. And I could see that there was this evolution going on again. Things were changing, and my daughter was growing up and life was changing. So I then went back and did a 200-hour teacher training to get me sort of up to speed. And I started teaching yoga to adults in the town that I live now in Belper. I think it probably would have been about 2016 when I qualified. But this is official qualification, but
you'd been teaching for some years prior to that, obviously.
A while, yeah. And it was in a really beautiful space locally. We were there for about 2 years. I had a really fortunate position where I had a lot of mums and carers that had been coming with babies who were then really ready. Their babies were 2, 3, 4, 5. they wanted to come for themselves at this point. They were bought in, they loved it. So it was a really natural evolution where I then was able to start doing classes in the community, roughly about 12 to 14 people. And I had the 2 people, I had the 1 person. I went through all the trajectory of it being Christmas and nobody coming, and you're teaching 1 person and it ends up being a 1-to-1. And then sometimes you'd get all these people coming and you'd just think, wow, this is amazing. And it would undulate and you learn to adapt and teach in different ways to different groups of people. And then there was a situation a few years ago where the centre that I was teaching in, it was just a really small community space. They needed to put their prices up quite considerably because they were losing money. It was nothing personal, but it didn't make it viable for me to then run the classes there. And I wanted to start introducing more classes, and because it was a community space, it was being run by there were lots of different classes and things going on.
Wait, can I stop you for a second and ask you about that moment? Because that sounds like a significant moment right there that relates to like how we choose to run our places now. So you were teaching out of this one place, it was a community center, and you said they weren't making enough money and they had to raise their rates. So basically it's just like their rent was too high, and so they just like had to raise the cost of the classes. Is that what we're saying?
Basically, they needed to increase their costs. Therefore, they had to pass that cost on to me.
Yeah.
And I could no longer sustain a reasonable business based on the fact that the cost had increased incrementally quite dramatically.
So wait, did you pay for the space that you were using there? It like they ran the classes and then paid you, or no, you were paying for a space rental essentially?
I rented I can't remember. I think you rented it for 3 hours. I think it was for a morning or an afternoon or an evening, I think. So I was able to run 2 classes back to back with a small window of exchange to make it viable.
And do you remember what the rates were? Like, what were you paying for? Because I'm actually like considering that right now, in terms of, I came up with another way, which we can talk about later, but like, I'm just sort of curious. So they just came up with an hourly rate, and then you got 3-hour blocks that allowed you to do 2 back to back with a little bumper in the middle.
Yeah. Do you know what, Jay? I can't remember.
It's all right.
It's a long time
But it went up considerably is what you're saying.
I remember it went up considerably to the point where I sat down and did the figures, and that's when I realised how vulnerable my business was, and I was nothing without a space.
Yeah.
I can have all the students in the world and I can have it all on paper, but if I don't have anywhere to practice, there's nothing there. So, and that was quite a pivotal moment. I brushed over it a little bit, but actually it was really significant because that gave me the push to start thinking about, is it viable? Should I take on my own space? And initially, I wasn't sure. Space is rare in the town that I live, and often expensive. But I had this sort of what felt like an intervention, like a guiding hand. I was literally, this is a random part of the story, but I'd taken my dog, I've got 2 dogs, I'd taken them down the field for a walk one day and put them back in the car, was driving up the road up Derwent Street, which my studio is now on, and drove into this it's an old antiques mill that sells lots of different things. It's a beautiful space. It's 3-4 stories. I think it was built in the 1900s, and it used to be a flour mill. We live in a heritage area, so it's where the Industrial Revolution sort of exploded. So we've got lots of mills and rivers and things where we live. It's quite a historic town. And I walked into this reception, having not been in there for about 25, 30 years, even though we lived in the town at this point, we'd moved, and just went wandering into reception and said, I don't suppose you've got any space for a yoga studio, have you? And he sort of like went, maybe. Showed me the space. It didn't work. We tried to make it work and it didn't. Planning applications, access, the rest of it just wasn't working, didn't add up. And then the lovely chap that still owns the space now rang me a week later when I think I might have a solution. They had a separate entrance, and it used to be an old florist's. They'd left. The space was partially empty, and there was a few other units. There was an old record, a vinyl record shop, like a little collectibles charity shop space. And there was this tiny little space that you could have got potentially like 8 mats in. And you would have had to walk through these 2 other little shop spaces to get to the loo and to get out. And slowly but surely, these places, they all just started to evacuate and leave the space. And it kept opening up till the end that we had this complete square space with access from the outside. So we've got our own entrance, and then double doors into the main mill. So we've got access to a fire door and the facilities and the loo and a kitchen. Just sort of like, just happened. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but this
No, it doesn't sound ridiculous at all. How many mats in that configuration that it ended up at?
Okay, so when it went to crazy, we got 20 mats in there. But there's a lot of story behind that. I don't do that anymore. After COVID, that was the time when we...
All right, so that we'll get back to that. Okay, so
well,
basically though, but wait, just to stop to kind of like connect with your story, because it's totally the same as mine in that the only reason it happens is because there's that person who called you and said, I think I've got a solution. That person wanted to help you have a yoga center for some reason. It's the exact same thing. It's why I'm in this space. The landlord of this space said to me, I'll take these walls out for you. He'll pay to do a major construction renovation to the space to make it work for me. And I don't have to pay for that. Because if that didn't happen, it doesn't happen. But he wanted it to be a yoga center. That's the only reason it happened.
It's exactly the same.
Yeah.
Exactly the same. Lovely. Colin, bless him. He's still there.
Yes.
When it comes to my classes now.
That's beautiful.
Really wanted to somehow just make it work for us, just out of the kindness of his heart, nothing more, nothing less, not particularly anything to gain. Yes, he's going to have somebody renting the space, and there's going to be footfall going into the antique
It's good for the other shops for sure.
It's great for everyone.
Yeah.
But I genuinely don't think that was his motivating factor or his intention. I think he just wanted to help. He was just, at that time, he obviously saw something in me that thought, yeah, let's give her a helping hand. I don't know where I'd have been now. I don't know what I'd have been doing, but who knows? I'm here.
Right.
So that was 6.5 years ago. We opened up September 2018. And there were a few hiccups, like you had hiccups. We had like floors pulled up and we realized we got a well underneath the floor and we had to replace grates and...
How soon did that happen? I mean, okay, well, let me ask you this then. So when you do that, when you take the leap and say, okay, I'm going to do it and take on a rent basically for this space, because this, and like you said, it wasn't like a purely business-based decision where you're like, yes, this makes perfect sense when I put out the numbers and I come up with my projected business plan for the next 7 to 10 years. This works in perfectly. Not at all. Basically, some divine intervention happens, and this angel basically in the form of this person says, hey, I've got this possibility for you, and makes it work. And then now you find yourself with this space. Okay, so up until that point, you have been teaching. You've been teaching in that town. You mentioned you had taught at different spaces. At that point, did you have like an email list that you're going off of? Do you post flyers up? Or is it just that location in and of itself kind of does bring some foot traffic and people start to see, oh, there's a yoga center here now?
I probably just about had a sustainable enough base to make it work.
Just people who would follow you, who were already kind of interested in coming to your classes. How were you staying in touch with them? Was it through that space? Or like I said, did you have an email list? Did you do any of those kinds of things, like business things, like email lists or spreadsheets or any of that stuff?
No, and I still don't do it now. And I've got friends that are horrified. But no, it was just through people, through community, through connection, through knowing people, through building relationships, that really old-fashioned stuff. That I had a community that were already sort of fully supportive. And I had classes that were established, obviously, at the other venue. Excuse me. And we luckily, I take the summer off anyway. So we sort of ended the classes at the old space, I think in July. And we opened the new space in September, and we had the whole of the summer, basically me and my husband, painting furiously, cleaning,
touching every inch of the space. I completely understand. Yes.
Yeah. It was the hottest summer for ages as well. And as soon as we finished, the weather changed, which was hilarious, but it doesn't matter. So I had this sort of community, and I think I was running, because I was still at that point, I was still doing baby yoga and kids yoga and adult yoga. The adult yoga was a small proportion of everything that I did and everything that I offered. And that continued for about 2 years, I think. And then I switched over to just full adult yoga and trained in Qigong, and that's what I do now. But when I got the keys, and I think I said to you, I don't do Instagram. I don't have email lists. I only very recently probably only about a year and a half ago, got a website. I mean, all the rules.
Only a year and a half ago?
Yeah.
Oh.
They just totally think I'm an anomaly. It was just Facebook and community. And, the type of small community that we've got, it is a good way to connect with people for free through just, local groups and parent and baby groups, parent and toddler groups, that sort of thing.
All right, let me ask you this. If you weren't doing, because by that time, by like 2018, like online registration for yoga centers and memberships and packages and all that stuff was already the norm.
Yeah.
Right? So what did you have an ongoing drop-in class schedule when you opened? Were you charging just like cash in the box like I'm doing? What were you, if you weren't doing any of the normal things that people were doing in 2018, how were you running things when you opened that place at the start?
So to support it, I ran the baby and the kids yoga were run as terms. I think there were 6 or 8 week terms at the time. So that used to cut down on my admin, my time, outside of teaching. And I had a guaranteed number of people and a guaranteed income that I knew I'd got for that period of time and that block.
Right.
The adult yoga classes initially, I think I had one. I started initially on a Wednesday night and I did 2 classes. And I started off with one class, and we started off with a relatively buoyant class. So I did that as a block, 4-week block, 4-week term. So people pay 4 weeks, they come to all of the 4 classes. I then started a drop-in class because there wasn't so many people at the time. I think I did an earlier session, so I did 2 classes back to back. The second class was always very popular, just the time worked for people. I think it was like 7:30 till 9. That's a good point. I don't do any classes that are less than 75 minutes to a 90 minutes.
No, you're still holding true. Yeah. You didn't go down to 60 minutes. You stayed true, although it used to be longer than 75, didn't it?
Yeah, mine on average are about 90 minutes, and I struggle with that, to be honest with you. I think if you're going to do,
well, let me ask you a question about doing the series, because I think that's kind of the big difference, because I'm not doing that, and so you were doing that from the beginning, and that seems to make a lot of sense to me, especially when you're talking about like Baby and Me or like prenatal yoga, because they're kind of like cycles to that, like. Prenatal, there's literally 9-month cycles to the turnover in those classes. So in a way, somebody signing up for like a chunk of time makes sense. However, if you're running like straight, as you were calling them, adult classes or just like regular general attendance classes, and you're doing the signups, how do you do that if you don't have like an email list or like registration? Like how do people know that you're doing this series and when it's going to start and how to sign up if you don't have any of that stuff?
I think I was very blessed that I moved from doing the postnatal stuff with mums. I had almost like a ready-made audience of people that were ready to drop in. So it was a real natural progression. I was really.
But you must have been emailing people then, right? At least. I'm just saying, like, how does that happen? How do people show up to sign up? If you're like, okay, this is the deadline to sign up for the 6-week block. How does anybody know that? How does anybody know that you're doing it or to come in and sign up? Or just like, do you mention it when they come to class? Like, I'm starting a new series.
Yeah.
And then people are like, oh, sign me up for this series. Like,
I would write it down in a book. Yeah. And we would have a list of people. And when it got to like full, there would be a little waiting list. And when it got to like long waiting list, we might start a new class if there's enough people to do another class. So I think, yes, it was emailing people that were already on board with the postnatal stuff. Facebook, probably a little bit of advertising. I can't remember doing anything other than that. I may have put leaflets out in the town. I may have put posters up around in the town, old school. Mm-hmm.
But mainly it's just like, hey, everyone, I'm starting a new series. If you want to sign up, the sign-up sheet's over there. Is that what we're talking about? And then people walk over and put their names down. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Get it. But then you have to have a good amount. Clearly, you have to have, like you said, a base of people who are coming in. How many of the people were coming in through connections you already had? And how much was the space, like having a place, bringing people in also?
I don't think the space was probably bringing that many people in initially because it probably wasn't the target audience because it was an antique centre. It may have been maybe a slightly different demographic. Although that's changed now because their space has grown as well and they're got much more footfall too. Do you know what? It sounds weird, Jay, but it was like this, like it just happened. And I don't want to be dismissive of it because I'm deeply respectful that the fact that I'm supported by something.
People are showing up. Yes, I completely understand. Like I had someone just a random person who just show up yesterday and he was great. And it was a 1-to-1, but it was just like, I don't know. I was thinking about how crazy that is. Like you open this space and you just like have a sign on the door and then sometimes people show up, sometimes they don't. I guess from the beginning, have there been months where you didn't make enough money to cover the rent?
Early days, definitely, because obviously there's training, there's insurance, there's everything else that goes on in the background that we pay for, that we commit to. Certainly, there would have been classes where I had, like I said, 1 or 2 people come. Right. And I paid the rent for that class. Sure. And it possibly would have covered the cost of the hall or the room, and that would have been it. So I have gone through that phase and that stage of barely breaking even. But I think the time that I got the studio, when that dropped in and when that happened, it was just for whatever reason, it was the perfect time for things to grow, for people to be hungry for it, to be ready for it. And I think because of having a daughter at school, you get to meet lots of people locally in the community. I think I really do genuinely think without the foundations of making all these connections with women when they're at their most vulnerable and holding that space for them, and then them wanting to come back and develop their own practice and delve deeper into their practice in their own right, that it would have been much more difficult. And I've had this conversation with my husband, and I don't know whether I'd be a yoga teacher now if I started now. I think it would be too mammoth a task. The market's heavily laden with teachers, and that it continues to be flooded with the industrial complex of.
I'm going to jump in and just say it's so interesting to hear you say that. I was saying that very thing to someone else recently. I was reflecting back on other times, like when I came into being a teacher, and thinking about comparing that to now, and sort of saying the same thing. I really don't think that someone can do what I did now. Like, it doesn't,
No.
that avenue, the avenue that you and I took, which was really not something that we did so much, or it's like you said, there's that cliche thing of it happened to me, but like, even in the sense of like it working and it growing, and like you're describing the center kind of taking on a life of its own, it doesn't seem like you did much to make that happen outside of like showing up, really. Or did you? Was there a lot more like marketing efforts or networking that you did? Or
I think it was all done within the framework of the classes.
yeah,
I think because I try to show up and be as authentic as I can possibly be,
right,
and do a really good job and live it and breathe it.
Yeah.
And not be automatic about it. I'm this thing, whatever we want to call it, this yoga thing, for me is not just, I don't open the doors to the studio and step into yoga teacher mode. This yoga thing is a way of living. It extends much further than the boundaries of the space. And I think people appreciate that and can maybe pick up on that.
Were there other centers in your town? Like in 2019, were there any other yoga centers in the same town?
No, there was not another yoga center. There were a lot of really, really good, well-established teachers, really good.
Like renting out spaces or whatever, but no like centers.
Absolutely. No centers. And there now is another yoga center, literally just down the road. And we're friends.
When did that open?
When did she? I think Tabitha opened hers. I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay.
Really, I've not been to the space, but I've known Tabitha for quite a long time, and she again is a brilliant teacher. British Wheel of Yoga. She's trodden the board. She's been doing it a long time. But hers is a completely different model to mine. So she's a yoga and a Pilates teacher, and she has the traditional yoga studio model where it is. She employs teachers. It's you buy. I don't think it's membership. I think you buy like class passes.
Yeah.
And they do offers at certain times when they probably need to bring in some more people, and they have like a bank of teachers that probably cover each other's classes. And I believe they are all employed by her to run classes.
Right.
So stuff. It wasn't a deliberate. I never really thought.
And just to take a pause, like all that you just described, which is the conventional model, which is what I did last time, that involves layers and layers of time and effort and energy to do it. All of the registration of all the classes and the keeping of the payroll, the doing of the payrolls, and all of that administrative work to run that, to have teachers need to get their classes covered. Do the teachers have to get the classes covered themselves? You know, to me in the past, when teachers had to call the other teachers to get their own subs, it was always a nightmare because there was always an occasion where someone couldn't find a sub who needed one. I actually just did it all myself in a way. Like I just had everybody have all the requests. You need all the requests to come through one person who knows everybody's schedule in a way.
Yeah.
Because then that person can kind of reach out. So I don't know. I say all of that because it is significant. Like people don't always think of that when they think about opening a place. But like the choice to run the center that way, like you said, and hire teachers, one, it's got to be in a place and a space that supports it. But usually it's like a higher overhead situation. And usually you are doing all of these things that do essentially maximize profits, or like do certain things that trigger people to like work with people. Like over the years, it's established like, oh, if I can get a couple dollars off and I buy 5, I'll buy 5, rather than just having a really low single class rate.
Yeah.
If you like the way they do like a lot of companies will like literally jack up the price of their thing 20% and then send you a 20% off coupon.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's just
and yoga centers do the same thing, because it works or whatever. But like, in any case, so I guess my other question, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit, but my other question is, I'm curious about what happened when the pandemic happened. How did you survive that? Like, did your landlord help you out with that too? Like, how did you weather that storm?
We weathered just. I can't say that I earned a living. I've sort of managed to, oh God, I can remember it as clear as day. So obviously I'd not got anything online. I know you had the fortune of, you were already
That's what I'm saying. You didn't even have a website, nothing. You were not set up.
I remember locking the doors because it had been all uncertain and nobody really knew what was going to happen. And everybody was saying, oh, it'd probably be 3-4 weeks and we'll all be back. And I knew, I had this deepest gut felt feeling that I'm not coming back here for a long time. I can remember grieving for it and feeling really deeply sad, but not understanding where the sadness was coming. It was very odd. And then obviously things started to evolve and we all realised we weren't going to go into a space for some time. So I had to sit down and work out what I was going to do, how I was going to sustain things. So initially I went online. I didn't do anything for anyone outside of my own group. It was a private group of classes. I charged a fixed fee per week. And you could go to as many classes as you wanted to within that week. And I think I did 4 or 5 online sessions, some morning sessions, some evening sessions, some yoga, nidra sessions to help with people just to chill and relax.
Like just zooming from your living room or whatever?
I was literally in this room that I'm in now. It was in my...
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.